That's no moon. It's a space station.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Just one quick announcement before we get started. Tickets are on sale for our Hawaii retreat/conference next year, April 20th through the 24th, 2026 on the Big Island in Kona. We're going to be going out and having an adventure with dolphins and whales and going to some sacred sites. And it's like a conference. We're going to be doing half conference, half retreat. It's going to be a lot of fun. So if you guys are interested in joining us, we'll be announcing more details coming soon, but you can buy tickets now at journeytotruth.online. We're very excited to move away from Grafton and go over to the Big Island because it's absolutely beautiful there. So we hope to see you there. And today's guest is Brad Olsen, returning guest. We've had him on a few times in the past, and I just recently was in Sedona, and I caught one of his new presentations on the secrets of Antarctica, and it kind of gets into like the German history in Antarctica and Hollow Earth, and he's bringing some new documents and some maps and some stuff forward that I've never seen, and if I have seen it, it's very rare. I would say it's rare. It's not well-known stuff, especially if you're new to this, and I believe Brad has made friends with somebody who is providing information to him, which I find absolutely fascinating. And it dovetails perfectly with the Inner Earth webinar that we did. And so Brad is actually going to be playing a slideshow today and going through some of this presentation, which is more or less of a preview for his new book coming out, which I'll let him tell you about. And we're just going to do the slideshow. And we'll just kind of have a conversation about each slide as we go through it. So welcome to the show, Brad. We're happy to have you here.
Hey, guys. I'm glad to be back. And congratulations on the new moves and the new conferences and all the new viewers you have on Journey to Truth podcast. It's a great platform, and you guys are incredible hosts. So happy to be here and share some very breaking new information about Antarctica that relates to my new book called Secrets of Antarctica, which is available for pre-sale on Amazon right now, but won't be out until the end of the year. So just giving a snapshot of some new research I got from a research assistant named Frank in Europe. He currently lives in Denmark, but he's fluent in German, and he also can translate into Russian. And that'll all come into the big picture here once we get started. But just want to say thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course. And
Yeah.
this all started too. Well, I saw your presentation, and then immediately a couple days later, basically we were in Chaco Canyon,
Right.
sitting around the campfire, which turned into more of just like a lantern because we couldn't light a fire because we were sitting there and we started talking about this, and it was just kind of a no-brainer that we should do a show about it. And we have, because there's some stuff that I think I can add that we can bring to the table as well, and it can really paint this full picture. So, the whole premise here is that the Germans made it to Antarctica and AKA Hollow Earth long before it was ever made public, and there's evidence to support that, and that's what your presentation primarily, that's the meat of your presentation, but you have some very intriguing, compelling evidence information. So I'll leave it up to you if you want to, kind of introduce your presentation a little better and then share your screen, or how do you want to approach this?
Yeah, just any other comments you might have, Aaron or Tyler, because you guys had the Carl Unger letter at Journey to Truth, and we're gonna show that actual letter, who was a U-boat sailor who was basically sending a letter out to Germany after the war was over saying that, "We're not prisoners, but we're going to this inner Earth." They found out that the Earth is hollow, and we're making this journey to this new German colony in New Schwabenland. So really fascinating stuff, and does bring to the fore a lot of the evidence that we need for making the claim that the Germans found inner under ice route into inner Earth. And that doesn't necessarily mean under the mantle of the Earth, but what it means to me is they found the route under the ice, and the polar plateau in Antarctica is 2 miles thick. So it's quite a fascinating finding that these KGB files are coming out to see the light of day. And my book, Secrets of Antarctica, will be the first in the English language to describe them and reprint some of these maps. So, really interesting stuff we have for you guys today.
Yeah, and that letter in particular you're talking about. So we have these boards at our conference, these poster boards with just information, just stuff for visuals for people to look at, and it's engaging, and it's kind of like red pills anybody that walks by them. And I had just a transcribed version of that letter printed out on the board that I found through my research, and I was shocked when you had the actual hand copy of the hand printed letter. And not only was I impressed by that, but I also realized that the version I had found was incomplete. There was more to the letter that shows up in the original version. So that's towards the end of your slideshow or the beginning, wherever it's at in your slideshow. But I guess go ahead and share your screen and we can just go through this and then we'll just chime in along the way. Unless, Aaron, you have any questions or anything to add before we start.
No, I'm excited to see this. Let's do it.
Righto, let's do it. We good?
Yeah, perfect.
Yep.
Excellent. Okay, start it again now. Okay, so this will be the opening slide in my new presentation, Secrets of Antarctica. We see the entire continent here with the massive polar plateau in East Antarctica. But what I really want to point out in this map is not only the route that I took on the far right from southern tip of South America to the Palmer Peninsula, but the sea ice, which is dead of winter right now down in Antarctica. Of course, we just had our summer solstice. And so that sea ice extends way far out. One of the first things we saw on the sailboat trip down there, and you guys know, maybe some of your listeners also have heard that I took a sailboat trip down there about 7 years ago to the Palmer Peninsula, which in this image would have been chock full of sea ice. We wouldn't be able to do it this time of year. So the only time you can really go down there, especially by boat, is between November and March. And then it's pretty much, once again, a frozen continent with only 1,000 people wintering over in some of the bases there. So here's the 5th largest continent in the world and sparsely populated with only 1,000 people right now. So it's quite a continent of mystery, of frozen ice, and what is going on there below the ice is the thrust of my recent research and information that I've been gathering, because Antarctica is the most volcanically active continent of the world. 91 known geothermal features on the continent, including 18 active volcanoes. Mount Erebus has a lake of lava in it permanently. Only one of 2 volcanoes around the world that has that. And so it would allow the propensity for freshwater lakes to exist, which they do, including rivers that flow out, as well as large domes under the ice. And we'll keep that in mind as we go through this presentation, that you have the ability to basically inhabit a not so drastically cold and windy on the surface area under the ice. So we start the book out with a map of the ancient sea kings. I think you guys have seen this map of the Piri Reis map over 300 years before it was officially discovered by whalers and sealers. This map came out from a Turkish admiral, and he says in the liner notes there on the left-hand side that it was created from source maps dating all the way back to the Library of Alexandria. So Ptolemaic Greek time, which Ptolemy was the first map maker of the entire world, excluding North and South America, but it did include Antarctica. So where are these map makers getting this information from? And what I really find interesting in the Piri Reis map, where it says Antarctica, so that is the Filchner ice shelf as we know it today. And indeed, there are islands under that ice shelf, which now sonar technology has identified uh, uh, pretty accurately as where they're located on this Piri Reis map. So that is interesting. And then also that Antarctica is showing different animals that would be down there, including reptiles and mammals. And I can tell you, there are no animals on the land. The largest living creature in Antarctica is a tiny little insect that can survive the extreme cold. There
Are
are
there
no
no there are no
birds, there's no
penguins?
trees, there's nothing green down there either.
Well, they're penguins, correct?
There are penguins, but there are sea
Right.
birds that mostly feed under the ice, and then they come on shore to have their rookeries. We used to have a saying when we were sailing down there that you could smell the penguin rookeries before you could see it. Sure enough, you'd come around a corner, and there they are, thousands of them nesting on the cliff tops. So just such a fascinating place down there. It really was otherworldly, I thought. It didn't seem like you were on Earth at all.
Mhm.
So that's
Yeah.
Antarctica for you.
And then this map came out 300 years before the official discovery, correct?
Correct. Yeah, even 300 years, over 300 years. So 1821, the first whalers and sealers arrived on the Palmer Peninsula, the finger that sticks out towards South America, and then the age of discovery began. But interestingly enough, there are all these other maps around that time. This one, the Monte Urbano map of 1587, and here you have the giants of Patagonia. And I do have a chapter in the new book about the giants of Patagonia, which is very interesting that they came up to basically the hips of these giants, the earliest mariners, including um, the first sailors to go through the Magellan Straits, which you can see indicated on the larger part of the map. They saw these giants and they were just utterly fascinated because they're barely wearing any clothes. They're twice the size of the Spanish sailors, and they're all but gone now. They were the Patagonian Giants, and they did not last through the taking over of Argentina and Chile, where there's only 1% of the indigenous population that remains there. It's quite a shame that this tribe has vanished. But there's a connection to Antarctica. Not only is it the closest landmass to Antarctica, but that they appear to be perhaps, I don't know, Nephilim or Anunnaki or some kind of giant humans, quite different than the mariners of the day. And you can also see the Italian writing here, region of giants, Regioni di Giganti. So it was actually quite well known to all the mariners in this period that there were giants in those lands, but they were very docile. They did not pose a threat or anything. But the diseases that affected so many Native American people in the Americas took their toll with these giants too, because they had no natural immunity to diseases like smallpox and um, other diseases that could be transmitted, and
Right.
did a number on them. So let's move forward to this modern age, and this is actually the map the Germans made as they were charting out this area called New Schwabenland, and that's the region of Antarctica directly below South Africa, which, by the way, during World War II, they were basically not allied with Nazi Germany, but sympathetic to the cause. So the U-boats and the supply ships could refuel and gain fresh water and new supplies in South Africa before they were coming down here to this area called New Schwabenland, which it was a German colony, and thousands of men went missing after the war, uh, including women that were brought in to be wives from Ukraine and also from Croatia.
Y-
They mostly went with their own free will, but they needed to start a colony. And around the area of the Schumacher Ponds, bottom left there, is this series of lakes that never freeze. And this is really interesting because here is these geothermal features where they could tap into an energy source of also fresh water source. And this is where they set off to go found the base 211, which in the research with Frank, we've located that in the Mulig-Hoffman Range. So this team of explorers set across this polar area, and they found a suitable location here in the Mulig-Hoffman Massif. Um, while Schumacher stayed behind with the plane and established that these indeed were geothermal lakes because the water was warmer below and colder on top. So the thermocline was quite opposite of what we would when you go swimming in a lake, you know how when you swim deeper, it gets colder. It's the opposite there. So proving that these were geothermal heated lakes. And so this was known by the Allies when they were coming down during Operation High Jump. We'll talk about that in a little bit.
Right, and I know just from doing my own research, whenever they were bringing all those men and women, it was kinda like a forced breeder program in a way. Maybe not forced, but they were trying to preserve the Aryan race. So they were looking for pure blood Aryans, right? And in particular, because they were trying to create like this super soldier, this perfect human, right? And this is very interesting to me that they would choose Antarctica to do that. And why would they, unless they had somewhere to house all these people, right?
Absolutely. You gotta have women to have a breeding program, and, they did, and some estimates are that it was up to 250,000 Germans were originally, brought down there, as well as the women from Ukraine, Croatia, and Germany itself. But it was a one-way trip, and that was, evident in the Karl Unger letter, which we'll get to, that they knew that they were going down here. But after a while, they most of the people didn't really like to be there, and they had also set up micronations in South America, Chile and Brazil and Argentina. What a micronation is very similar to the Vatican City. It's a city-state within the city of Rome, within the country of Italy, but it has its own laws and rules, and they did a similar function buying up huge tracts of land, and I got close to some of them, and it's all German money down there. They're the wealthy ones, and still to this day really call the shots. So when the war ended, the money man, Martin Bormann, he went missing. One of his last transmissions was about U-boats coming to Terra del Fuego, making a tran transfer of supplies, presumably heading down to Antarctica. So he went missing with all the metric tons of gold that they took out of the Bundesbank of Berlin. They did not find any of that after the war. So if you got the money, you can start funding corporations, starting new ones, buying these huge tracts of land for your micronations, and even bringing down their high-tech UFO, uh, backward engineered technology that, Hermann Oberth, who is a paperclip Nazi in America, when asked, "How did Germany become so advanced so quickly?" He said, "Well, we had help from our friends from above," pretty much indicating that they were not only using the crashed discs that they got from the Black Forest area of Germany in the 1933, but also an intact UFO that went down in the Lombardy region of Italy in the late 1930s that Mussolini turned over to the German engineers.
Right.
So they were able to use these craft to very rapidly advance. And that is what most researchers now would agree were the craft that
Right. And if you're familiar with the Sands of Time material, book 6 is the Vril Diamond Diaries, and it's a
ah,
verbatim diary from this German scientist, Baron Wilhelm Spottenheim, and it's his personal involvement working with these Vril Diamond who were channeling the blueprints and the schematics for these Haunebu flying saucers. And if this is a real diary, and I believe that it is, it gives you the entire history, 30 years of missing history here on how this whole saucer program even came into development. So it's a fascinating read, and it dovetails in perfectly with what you're talking about.
yeah, because you have UFOs coming up out of the water and attacking one of the three different armada groups. I think it was the one that Admiral Byrd was in because he initially was the first. He commanded all three of the different squadrons. The West and the East group were definitely in the New Schwabenland region, and they were charting out these mountains too. Part of Operation High Jump was to photograph and map as much of the coastal mountain ranges as they could. And when they got close to base 211, this German base that they called a Science City in Muleg Hoffman, that's when the Battle of High Jump, or also called the Battle of Antarctica, took place. Only about 20 minutes total route. They, in a show of force, took out one of the ships. This was some of this Russian intel that came out at the collapse of the Soviet Union. You could go into Moscow in 1990 or 1991 with a suitcase full of hard currency or gold and silver, and people would come out of the KGB offices with whatever kind of information you wanted. So, hey, I want an alien autopsy video. Here you go.
Hmm.
We want a crashed UFO. You got it. But also a lot of Antarctica information came out, including what really happened in the Battle of High Jump. There's a great documentary about it in Russian with English subtitles that goes into the whole history of the fall
Yeah, I'd like
of
to watch that
High
actually.
Jump. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have it, a link of it, and I'll share it with you guys after the show. I have it on my Secrets of Antarctica Facebook page. Just
Oh,
have to scroll down to find it, but it's on there.
okay,
An
cool.
amazingly accurate description of the hole in the ice and the what really went down in the high jump, which was when the Allies were getting too close. By the way, high jump was the first moment the Allies could get down there after the war. So the war ends in May of 1945. They are assembling their group to get down there the very next Antarctica summer. And you got to think, what's the urgency to go down and do a training exercise when they could have gone and trained in the Arctic or Greenland? But no, they got to send down a huge military armada as quickly as they could because the British were spying on the Germans, the American had intel, so did the Soviets, and they knew that this was a respite for the German scientists and others to escape after the war.
Right.
This is what the Schumacher Ponds look like on Google Earth. And interestingly, there are two bases there, a Russian base and an Indian base. You can see some of those lakes are dark, dark blue that never freeze. And this is what's called an Antarctic oasis, a region that never freezes over, that has these geothermal features. And it could be that there were some outposts here, but I think the real base was over in the Mulig Hoffman. But then we come into evidence that the Germans found out that there was passages into this inner earth. And again, it could just be into the continental landmass area. And they do have the name Agartha in some of the U-boat captain documents. So, for example, when you're going through these different routes, one of them, when you get to the lighthouse of Agartha, you pull out packet 3, and that'll give the crew members an idea of how to deal with the land of advanced races in Agartha. So even though this cartoon and the image is, I think, clearly AI or generated by an artist, uh, it does give you some examples of what might the Germans had found down there. And you even have the Admiral Byrd's Flight of 47 and other cave systems around the world that could lead to it, including in Tibet. And Tibet plays actually a big part of how the Germans found this area, because all throughout the 1930s, they were doing expeditions down there. You guys might have seen that movie, 7 Years in Tibet, although they don't get into anything about inner Earth or what they were really doing. They were just on a mountain climbing expedition. Like, that would be so important to be the first to climb a mountain.
Right.
But what they're really looking for was any kind of artifacts or contact with these advanced races. And Frank, the research assistant, and I, we believe they found it because they mounted their New Schwabenland expedition also in 1938 when the team came back from Tibet with information how to access this inner Earth area. And let me show you what that looks like. Well, first, the British were also spying on the Nazis moving in down there. And these are some photos that I took at 2 of the spy stations on the right, Port Lockroy, and also uh, down there at the Vernansky base, which is a Ukrainian base. Believe it or not, the Ukrainians have a base that the British gave them. And both of these bases are museums. You walk in there and it's just like time stood still. They're just as they were, even old cans of food on the shelves and their old radio equipment. So they were spying on the Germans the whole time during World War II, and they knew that they were bringing down huge amounts of material and personnel to their New Schwabenland bases. And there was more than one. It wasn't just base 211. It was also the New Berlin base and a third one I found called the Thule Colony, which we'll save for the book because Admiral Byrd, he did his first flight over the South Pole in 1929, and there's the exact flight route, November 28, 29, to the South Pole. And then the detail on the right, you see when he gets to the South Pole, it wasn't, okay, we made it, let's head on back. No, they do this big triangular flight pattern around, and that happens to be exactly where the no-fly zone is at the South Pole to this day. And now Brian S., who is one of Linda Moulton Howe's whistleblowers, she gave me his contact information. We had a hour-long talk a few months ago, and I asked him to describe when he flew out of the South Pole Station, what they saw with this hole in the ice, because they weren't supposed to go over the no-fly zone, but they did anyways because somebody's life was in danger, and that was the most direct route. And he said it was about 25 or 30 miles away from the South Pole Station, right in the middle of this no-fly zone, which is a air sampling area. So they were supposed to be sampling the air, and you couldn't have any plane go even high above it. But he said there was no air sampling station at all. It was just a cover for the hole in the ice. And in fact, there was even a road that corkscrewed down that you could take snowcat or snowmobiles on land. But he said definitely big enough to fly a plane into, several miles across. And this also corresponds with some of the Soviet data uh, about Kaczynski was this guy who was on the conference circuit in the 1990s talking about the hole in the ice, that he got some information also from the KGB when the Soviet Union collapsed. And he also said several miles across, 25 miles from South Pole Station in the no-fly zone area. So I love it when we can get confirming data points that also show that Admiral Byrd knew where the hole was in 1929. Then come Operation High Jump, he goes on a flight right away, and there were 3 hours of missing time. They thought he crashed. They couldn't reach him on the plane, but he only went with his radio man, guy named Howie, and then they flew into the hole in the ice, and that's when they lost their time. But also, as you guys posted at Journey to Truth with the Diary of Admiral Byrd, that he met this very advanced race of people, but was escorted in by 2 UFO type crafts he called Flugelrods. There is no such word in the German language of Flugelrods, but there it is written in his diary. And then he goes and meets the master and tells him that they're not happy with the US discovering atomic bombs and dropping them on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This, of course, is just after the war ended. And when he was escorted out by the same Germanic-speaking people, the last thing they said to him when they gave him control of his plane back to fly back was "Auf Wiedersehen," which is goodbye in German. So, a lot of corroborating evidence that this high-tech civilization that he called was described to him as the domain of the Ariani was actually also the New Berlin base. And this is probably where the majority of those 250,000 personnel were living and existing.
Right, and that's absolutely fascinating. And then he went back to Pentagon to relay the message, and they basically told him to, you're a military. They reminded him that he was a military man and that never speak of this again.
He
If
was
I have
given a gag order for the rest of his life, but he was also read the Riot Act because when he was heading back to the US via Chile, he gave an interview on an El Mercurio newspaper where he said, not to frighten anybody, but we would be confronted with an enemy that has the ability to fly pole to pole at incredible speeds. So then
Right.
you kind of think, well, geez, do we even have a plane right now that could fly pole to pole at incredible speeds?
Right, and then
Exactly.
he mentioned in an interview too, the land beyond the poles, and, flat earthers like to use that as evidence that he's talking about the ice wall, but if you do the research like you've done here, it's clear that he was talking about inside the earth beyond the
Yeah.
poles, not past it.
Inside the pole,
Right.
it means
Yep.
beyond the pole, not yeah,
Yeah,
beyond
still beyond it, but yeah.
Beyond it.
Yeah. It's not the
But
way that
that's
flat earthers think.
that's a really interesting point, you guys, because up on the polar plateau, there is nothing beyond. It's just ice for hundreds of miles in all directions. And so Prince Harry went down there with a bunch of his army buddies in the late 1990s, and they went cross-country skiing for a week out of the South Pole. Well, there's nowhere to go unless they were going to see the hole in the ice, which has also been dubbed the Illuminati Disneyland, where maybe some of the other elites that were going down there in the time frame. Oh, more like 2017, 2016, I think Prince Harry went down there, not the 1990s. But a lot of elites were going down there at that time, including John Kerry on election day in 2016. You think he'd have better things to do campaigning for his party in North America, but no, he's down in Antarctica as Secretary of State. So a
Ye
lot of weirdness regarding this hole in the ice, Admiral Byrd's diary, and what it exactly is under the ice.
Right.
And so, yeah, this New Schwabenland expedition, um, and I just saw recently that the flag for the Kriegsmarine, you see those stars on the lower flag? Well, that's the Southern Cross. That is only visible in the Southern Hemisphere. So why would they have a flag for their U-boat corps with the Southern Hemisphere Southern Cross on it? just like in Australia, they also have the Southern Cross, or New Zealand. It's is prominent of a constellation in the Southern Hemisphere as our Big Dipper is in our night sky.
Mhm.
So they went down there, and so did hundreds of U-boats and supply ships. Constantly during the war, they're resupplying, bringing down new personnel, and at the end of the war, over 100 U-boats have never been, adequately accounted for after the war. They just went missing, as well as all this personnel as well. And here you have, Frank came up with these, passports he found and on a German website, and he did some research and found out that they were very, very much authentic, that they were looking for selected young men and officers handpicked, presumably from, orphaned families. They didn't want people that would be missing the homeland, and they got stamped in their passport for New Schwabenland, Base 211, and New Berlin, the new German colonies down there, as well as officers who, were part of the Kriegsmarine Führer Convoy. And remember, Arcturus Ra was at the conference, and he came up and he started translating all this German and, saying, "Oh, yeah, that is basically the way they would spell it and write it." And the Führer Convoy at the end of the war were all these U-boats that left Hamburg, Germany, and the last war of World War II, which we never hear about in our history books, was a resounding victory for the Third Reich, which never surrendered after World War II, nor did the SS, the, Special Services Corps that were, basically running the show with the Anunnaki Society and all the occultic, uh, research that they were doing in Tibet and Antarctica. And so you have officers here with their own, U-boat. Here's U-530, which basically, after the war was over, several months later, in May of 1945, just shows up right outside of, Buenos Aires, Argentina, with a full crew, but with no supplies. And crew members were all most of them had, eye patches and injured in the last days of the war and were still all bandaged up, so it seems like they were, the rejects that weren't allowed to stay in New Schwabenland, and then they just surrendered, and didn't say, what they were doing, but they were part of this Führer convoy, and so the Americans got a hold of those U-boats and the, crew members and interrogated them, but, couldn't actually ascertain what they were doing in Antarctica, but, dropping off material and other personnel is what it looks like. And so some other information on the U-boats and, how they were building them like crazy at the end of the war. In 1945, more U-boats per month than all the previous years. So they knew they were gonna lose the war. They knew it all the way in 1943, and they were using the U-boats to get all the gold out, get all the material and personnel, bringing them not just to the bases in New Schwabenland, but also to these micronations in South America. So this is one of the most fascinating finds that Frank came up with, and it was basically this journalist in, Russia at the end of the Soviet era was he just bought these, on the black market, and there's a whole stack of them. They're all the same, but they have different stamps and different signatures, um, and they were the maps that were to be given to the U-boat captains, in 1945. They were even had a date stamp that they were made, of this inner Earth area. And as we were saying with, Ishmael Perez, who was at my presentation, and, um, Arcturus Ra and you and Brian Zing, that, this could be what the flat earthers are kinda mistaking the, beyond the ice as. and that is the under ice zones, which were mapped out meticulously by the Germans, including, if you see on the left there, you have New Schwabenland on the map, but that doesn't look anything like the surface. You have New Berlin, as well as Asgard, and all these very exotic names. Asgard is also on the right-hand side, and Shambhala, which is in, I thought, Tibet. But they're mapping this out. Maybe this is under the North Pole on the right and under Antarctica on the left. So Frank did the translation here. There was also a Kriegsmarine U-boat factory, so damaged U-boats could get repaired down there, and showing this entrance, this very enigmatic entrance under the ice. And I'll show you the map of the U-boat commanders, what they would need to follow to get to some of these locations. And they charted this terrain under the ice at both poles, we think. And of course, Antarctica has the New Berlin base, which was spoke of by Admiral Dolence, who became the final Führer, no, final week after they said Hitler committed suicide. I think, of course, he escaped, just used a doppelganger. And in the History Channel series Hunting Hitler, they actually convinced the Russians to let them do a DNA test on the skull that was supposed to be Adolf Hitler, recovered from the bunker after the war. Turns out it was a woman. So there is no evidence that Hitler died in the bunker in 1945, but escaped with so many other top people like Martin Bormann, the money man, who kept popping up all over South America in the 1950s. So the German Navy was using this information. We think that they gained in Tibet. The Tibetans would tell them, this is the route you need to take to get to this inner Earth city. And as Ismail Perez says, well, that kind of makes sense because he was sort of under the impression that beyond the ice wall, there were these different areas. And indeed, in these U-boat maps, you can see different areas beyond the ice wall, if you want to call it that. But I would say it was more directions under the ice shelf to get to this.
Yeah. And what's even more impressive here, or maybe more important, is the oceans. So we're talking about continents inside of our planet, and then oceans. These are unnamed oceans as well. Massive bodies of water, which modern science has detected oceans under our oceans with more water than our own oceans. So, I mean, we have scientific evidence to prove this, but they just don't know that there's quite literally thriving civilizations down there as well. And that would also indicate that the gravity of our planet doesn't come from the core, but it comes from the crust. And whatever gravity is, I don't think we truly understand, and that's explained in the Sands of Time material. If we understood gravity, it changes everything. And obviously, the people at the highest levels do understand that.
Good point, Tyler. And we looked up this Valkyrischer Ocean, couldn't find it anywhere. Of course, there's no Valkyrischer Ocean on the surface area, but Rischer was the name of one of the commander of the New Schwabenland. So maybe it was named after him. They did that. They would name it after the main people, like Schumacher Ponds was named after the pilot Schumacher who landed the seaplane there. So maybe these are all place names of where they were finding. And I also find it kind of interesting that in the South America, South Hemisphere map on the left, you can see how it sort of bends around and there's lands that just go off the map. And it kind of feels to me like the other map maybe isn't Antarctica, but it's also the Valkyrischer Ocean is just sort of the other side of the South Pole and Antarctica landmass and the ocean around it that they clearly named.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's no coincidence that that's his same last name and the ocean is named after him. I mean, we're talking about major There's something very major here. Like I said, missing history. Oceans named after these German explorers.
Yep. And then this city of the Asses, which is featured here, and Asgard. These are names like Shambhala or Agartha, these mythical inner Earth cities, but are named on the maps. So it would appear that they did make some kind of contact with some inner Earth or under ice or under the Tibetan Plateau high civilization, and then got these directions how to sail there.
Well, I guess
Then
now would be well, go ahead. Go through this slide, and I'm gonna chime in with something that I found that would corroborate that, but go ahead.
So then they gave the U-boat coordinates, and you guys know how Germans are very exact with, if you dive 26 meters, you dive 26 meters, and then you travel along for, 50 kilometers, and then you come up, and then you reach this under the ice lake. You can see the, U-boat there on the surface. You travel along, and then you dive again, and you, get to another area where you reach the lighthouse of Agartha. They say very specifically there is a location under there, and this is your destination when you have arrived. And this is another one of those maps that was acquired by the Soviets at the end of the war that came out after the Soviet Union collapsed and shows the route that the U-boats would take.
Yeah, very specific route. I think that's interesting. It kind of reminds me of the latest Star Wars movie, the last one where they have the Wayfinder, that it's like a very specific route through the cosmos to get to this Empire stronghold. I just I think it's like, a nod to that maybe.
Oh, yeah. Art imitates life.
Right.
So perfectly. And so here they are. This is the very exact U-boat directions. Frank did the translation from the left there, which is on the map, and they give you the exact coordinates and the junctions and the latitude where you need to take your U-boat under the ice, under the sea ice that's floating, but then get under the ice shelf, which a lot of flat earthers have mistaken for an ice wall. It's not a wall. It does not connect down to the bottom, but it's hollow underneath. So you can take a submarine underneath these ice shelves. In fact, when we were down there, there was a group that was scuba diving. And one of the dives they did was to scuba dive under the ice shelf. I was thinking, wow, that's pretty ballsy. Scuba diving in Antarctica, can you imagine?
Right.
And doing wreck dives and seeing all kinds of very colorful life down there, about as colorful as a coral reef was some of the life down there. So you can pause this if you want to read these directions, but Frank charted it out. He took that map and put it on a Google map and approximately where the tunnel begins up there on the upper left, and then going all the way to Agartha or the New Berlin base, which is remarkably close to where the South Pole hole in the ice is, and where Admiral Byrd went to a very high-tech civilization down there. You could also take a U-boat to get there. And again, the Germans are very exact in their charting of this map, which you can see an insert on the right from those maps that were acquired by the Soviets at the end of World War II, who got into the Kriegsmarine, the Wehrmacht, and the Ahnenerbe Society, it means ancestral heritage in German. The Germans were the first and the last government to support the research not only into their people, the Aryan race, but also into all these artifacts. And many of them are occultic by nature. And so we think that they had been given these exact directions when they were in that Tibetan expedition. And they go there and they do this route They chart it out, and then they're able to go back and forth at will. Well, when the Soviets got this, Stalin ordered their own Soviet submarines to follow these directions. And so they get to the entrance where the tunnel begins, and they're met with other submersibles that come out of the cave. And in a very menacing way, we're saying, "You're not coming in here." So the Soviets were not allowed to come. And then in some of these documents that Frank has translated, they said that they're going to have to come back with torpedo submarines and blast their way through if necessary. But they were back basically turned away, whereas the German fleet was welcomed in. And so that's just sort of an interesting little side note with the Russian connection and all this. And so here's the famous Carl Unger letter translated. Who's saying to a friend in 1947, you can see the date on the top there. He's saying, "Dear old comrade, this news will be a surprise to you. The U-209 U-boat made it!" Exclamation point. "The earth is hollow." Remember when I was showing this slide, Arcturus Ra came up, he speaks German fluently, and he says, "Look at how they emphasize hollow, hol." And he was quite impressed with the handwriting. He said, "Yep, this is how you would write in cursive German in the 1940s, how they taught them in school." So he said, "The earth is hollow," in the letter. Dr. Haushofer and Hess were right. And by the way, they were all part of the Thule Society with Himmler and Hitler, and this was also occultic studies to gain whatever kind of edge they could get for the coming war. They would send out these excursions, but they were also proposing that the earth was hollow, that there were inner entrances. And so that's why the Germans were so fascinated with Tibet and other locations to try to locate some of these entrances to the inner earth. So Haushofer and Hess were right. The whole crew is well, but they cannot come back. We are not prisoners. I am sure the news will reach you, as this is the last connection with U-boat 209. We will meet again, comrade. I am worried for everyone who has to live their life on the surface of the earth. And now that the Führer has gone, God bless our example, Deutschland. With kind regards, Carl Unger.
Right. Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. I mean, the fact that you found that letter, like, I just think that's amazing. And I know from my research that this letter was actually, to verify it, was confirmed. The handwriting was confirmed by Carl Unger's family. It was confirmed by his family. Like, yes, that is his handwriting. So it was, it's a credible document, in my opinion.
Right.
And you guys had that reference to the group that has this letter, and they have done extensive research on it, not only with his friend and his family, that this was his handwriting, but that it was the writing style of the time and the paper and the ink that he used, all checked out to being
Right.
of
Yeah,
this
it's
age.
the International Society for a Complete Earth that was formed in Missouri, where I'm from, in 1977. So that's where I found the information, but that's you actually got the real deal here, so that's even more impressive.
Real deal. Yep, and even some more, confirmation, more data points that come together here of,
And yeah,
this letter.
and a couple things to add. So the book The Coming Race, which was published anonymously in 1871, and has since been refined, but it's narrated by an American who stumbles on an underground race descended from ancient Aryans that's harnessed a source of infinite power called the Vril. Its possessors, the Vril Ya, and basically it's believed to be an account of a superior subterranean master race and the energy form called the Vril. And I mean, that was 1871. So if the Germans, if that's a true story, then obviously they were tipped off. They knew what they were going. It wasn't an expedition. They had instructions, like you said. They had maps. They knew where they were going. It was an expedition, but it wasn't. They weren't exploring. They knew where they were going.
Yeah. And
And
they had very precise directions to get them there.
right. And I
Uh,
think it was from these previous journeys, right?
yep. Previous journeys, because this one is dated April 29th, it looks like, 1947. So we're talking 2 years after World War II ended.
Right.
Here's another U-boat going into inner Earth. Somehow they were able to get this letter to the surface and back to Germany, which I think is almost as interesting and fascinating as the letter itself. That
Right.
they were still having a connection with the outer world, but this seemed to have been the last opportunity. And so if I just go back to the slide showing the route under the ice, Frank pointed out that the route goes right under the Troll Station, and that is a station that is operated by Norway, which Norway was also part of the Third Reich and was one of the last countries to fall at the end of World War II, but also had a lot of U-boat ports in Norway. And this in this modern day is where these research stations are. So you also have the Tor station, which is also Norwegian. You have Kane 4, which is South African, and then you can see the Neumayer station, which is German. When I was going over the old maps after World War II during the Cold War, I was surprised to see that West Germany continued to maintain bases in New Schwabenland. So the Germans have never left this area. They've always stayed there. And then some of their allied nations in the war or nations they conquered, like Norway, but South Africa, also have their bases in New Schwabenland to this day. So perhaps the Troll Station had some kind of elevator or convoy where they could get out the last of these letters, including Karl Unger, and make their way back to Germany. But you can see that little tiny white speck next to the Troll Station. Google Earth does their little whiteout of this area. So we think that this could be something that is being hidden on Google Earth from the Troll Station, that maybe there is an outpost or some buildings that Google Earth doesn't want us to see there.
Right. I mean, it could be docks for the submarines under the ice at each one of those stations, is what I would imagine, right?
Yeah. And you can see in the Google Earth schematics here that they are now under the ice, but also into the continental area of Antarctica. So going back just 2 more, um, so this would have been under the ice, but then they would have, gotten to the point where they were going into the continental landmass. And I don't have this slide in this presentation, but I show it in my other Antarctica talk of what Antarctica would look like before it was covered with ice. And indeed, there are very long and deep fjords that extend well into the continental landmass of Antarctica. So that would show that the U-boats would have access deep into the continent if they knew the directions and where to go. I think this would have just been a fascinating movie, even just using the Carl Unger letter to
Well,
describe a U-boat expedition deep into the Antarctic ice.
I don't think they're ready to plant that seed yet. Uh,
Maybe you're right.
there's a book I sent you. We referenced it in our webinar too. It's called Genesis for a New Space Age, and it's about um 500 warrior colonists who left Germany in the 16th century, so in the 1500s, who were presumed to have perished 4,000 miles up the Amazon River. But what if you go on to read it, I'm not going to read it all. Basically, they were chased underground by the locals there who were attacking them, and they ended up finding this cavern system, and they literally spent 75 years, multi-generational, um, German colonists, they became a multi-generational society underground, basically, and they kept finding deeper and deeper caverns until they basically broke through to the inside of the planet. They thought that they came out into the others. They thought they reached the other side of the planet, and they actually found inner Earth where there was this already these like very tall beings, which they called the New Atlanteans, as that's how they referred to themselves as. But the story is absolutely fascinating. The adventure began in 1572, and it literally tells you that they found inner Earth in 1572 or 75 years after that. But if those were Germans, that if any of those Germans made their way back to the surface, they would have had maps and information of this world underground inside the planet. So this whole thing, I think Hitler and everybody involved, it was always their mission to find an entrance to find this land that had been spoken about by their ancestors.
Absolutely. And once again, giants in Antarctica, giants in Patagonia, there could be a connection there as well with a lost race of people
Right.
that came from this area and just
Yeah.
lived in the closest landmass, because nobody ever lived in Antarctica, not until the modern age. You obviously need technology and all the supplies because nothing can grow there really. So, it would be interesting that, if there was this connection with the giants to the, Patagonians, that there could have been a
Right.
connection, civilization down there one time.
Yeah, I am gonna read this one part if you have time, if you don't
Yeah,
mind,
go
because
for it.
it's fascinating. So, on the 75th year of their journey, their scouting parties broke out into the promised land. Emerging through a rock opening, the advance party looked about in wonder. All of them had been born inside the Earth's mantle, but had been raised to believe there was another world. At the first guides looked about, they beheld unending sky, trees, and rolling land, but more fascinating, everything, including themselves, was bathed in a light from a faint man made orb that hung in the real sky. Their arrival inside the Earth's rock mantle was at a midway point below today's countries of New Zealand and Australia. The Germans cheered, they prayed, and they laughed, for they thought they had arrived back on the outside world again. Hurrying inside the tunnel, they told of this new wonder they had discovered. More jubilant Germans from the tunnel system emerged. Sometime later, contact was made with occupants of this land who advised the German explorers that they had descended to the inside of the earth where hundreds of millions of peaceful people lived who shunned surface dwellers. The New Atlanteans, which they were called, moved through the air in magical, silent, round craft and drove four-wheeled vehicles without horse or oxen, which would have been amazing to these people in the 1500s. These people had an advanced civilization, which the amazed Germans recognized as hundreds of years ahead of the surface civilization their fathers had left years before. So, and they had an ageless longevity lifespan, no noticeable traces of old age in their bodies, and it goes on to explain these people. If that's a true account, then it just adds to everything you're saying, and to me, just gives it more validity.
Hmm. Good find there. And, this is the final slide. This is the new book. It'll be out at the end of the year. Whole bunch more information in the book in my new presentation, which, maybe when the book comes out, I'll come on again and give you, the update on some other stuff, including a notebook that was found, in the Wehrmacht, the, German army offices of, Colonel Wolf, and he was describing how the Hitler himself had given a, private talk to some of the army commanders, asking for these orphan soldiers to go down to Antarctica specifically and colonize, this area, and this was also found by the Russians and released after the war. So,
Wow.
the number 1 new release in Antarctica travel guides, and, there is a bunch of travel information in there. As you know, I went down there and, chock full of maps and images, over 100 and probably 120 images, about, 12 per chapter, and, it's gonna be a great book, and I look forward to, presenting it to hopefully Journey to Truth and Joshua Tree also next year, and having you guys, we can discuss it more and more information that comes out about it.
Yeah, and so
Yeah,
this comes out when? December?
The end of the year. Yeah,
Okay.
December 31st.
Awesome.
very nice.
Awesome.
Can't wait.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. You can
Yeah.
stop sharing your screen if you want now, but
Sure.
I'll definitely be grabbing that book and looking
Oh, yeah.
forward to that. Absolutely incredible job putting this stuff together. It's so needed right now amongst the flat Earth push that we see very heavily right now, and I just wish that people would take time and actually go through this information like you have, and at least question the fact that some of this stuff that they're coming across on TikTok and all these viral videos that are generated by AI might be fluff. It might actually be part of a psychological operation, because the truth, also, what you just laid out here, it also, I think, was the origins of a secret space program, because if they had these flying saucers, then, I mean, they weren't just staying here, right? And obviously this all was birthed out of these early expeditions and post World War II Germany.
Yeah, and as Ishmael Perez said at the presentation a couple weeks ago in Sedona, maybe we can find some common ground, that there is indeed a land beyond the ice. It's not a flat Earth, but it's this other realm that is indicated right here on these German maps, and that they had place names and exotic locations for those who could find this hole in the ice and get into this inner Earth realm. And the earth is hollow, as Carl Unger declares,
Yep.
that there is a whole other world down there. And no wonder there's so much secrecy about what's going on in Antarctica, because it really would change the whole dynamics. And I've always said that real disclosure could very well come from Antarctica. And the tagline on the back of the book is "All roads lead to Antarctica." Of course, there are no roads that go there, but
Yeah,
the roads to disclosure
right,
and our journey to truth could very easily be what we discover
right.
under the ice in Antarctica.
And they're detecting radio signals coming out of the ice
Yes.
in Antarctica now. I mean, there's these new, they're kind of just leaking out these reports that are indicating, okay, something's going on there. Which we know. I mean, it's like the hub of all these conspiracy theories. But you name it, there's a conspiracy theory about it
Right.
in Antarctica. But I think ultimately what you laid out here is the real secret. And it might also be a jumping off point for a secret space program and maybe some form of a spaceport. For all we know, I mean, we can speculate, but um, and also, here's a new article I sent you not that long ago. Scientists find 30 million year old untouched world under 3,200 meters of ice in Antarctica. That's a mainstream article now. Radar reveals ancient rivers, valleys, and even fossilized palm pollen, proving this was once a lush ecosystem, which we kind of knew that. But there's a history that's starting to surface. And I think the more people can believe this, the more people can grab onto this, it helps the collective understand that, yes, there's something going on.
Also, if you look on Google Earth, there's many sections that are just blurred out and blanked
Yep.
out. Why would they do that unless there's a lot of stuff they don't want you seeing, right?
Including way up there on the polar plateau, where
Right.
there's supposed to be nothing but ice. Why do you gotta block it out?
Right.
And I showed that in my first Antarctica presentation, and they're just even really obvious with just a white triangle put over certain places. But,
Right.
you make a good point there, Tyler, that now that the mainstream is getting into discussing entire landscapes, flowing rivers and lakes under the ice, is it wasn't just the article you sent me, but there was another study on Western Antarctica called the Wizard study, in the last few years. Then you have cosmic rays coming out of Antarctica. Nowhere else on the planet it does that, as well as these radio waves, which indicate some kind of higher intelligence with the radio waves, that there is some kind of civilization or some kind of advanced, maybe a craft that's very, very old but still functions. So that's why I think Antarctica could be the game changer here. This could really help people understand that disclosure of advanced civilization or ancient aliens, whatever you want to call them, could very well be coming from Antarctica.
Right, absolutely.
Absolutely.
And I just remembered something else that you might actually assist you in your research. And let me see if I can find it here really quick. But I did find an old copy of a National Geographic magazine, believe it or not, that literally talked about a German expedition to Antarctica in like 1901. It was one of the earliest National Geographics, and it was in the magazine. I can't find it right now, but if I stumble across it, I'll let you know because I think you would like to see that. So it's just more evidence, right? I mean, it's an actual photograph of the original magazine, but straight up talking about, and they were going for scientific reasons, but like you said, why would you risk the lives of that many men unless you were actually looking for something or you knew where you were going?
Yeah.
But
And Germans also set up bases in northern Greenland, up in the Arctic area, northern Norway. I mean, they were really looking for places where they could leave after the war, which after the war turned in 1943, they all knew it was only a matter of time. And they started preparations for getting out all the high technology, all the best stuff, all the anti-gravitic type technology. They sent the rocket scientists to America with Project Paperclip with Werner von Braun, who started up NASA, but they kept all the good stuff for themselves. And when they did get to some of these very high-tech research locations, like the Skoda Works, they didn't find any UFO craft, nor did the Russians, but they did find a couple scientists with a bullet to the head. And that is, if they didn't want to go, they had to kill them because they did not want this information technology to fall into enemy hands. And that kind of takes us to the place we are today. And our own government here in the US has been doing very secret flight tests. Of course, we've all heard of Area 51, and it's now moved out to Utah, where they do a lot of the testing.
King's Peak,
Um,
yeah,
Yep, because the Area 51 is just too notorious.
Yeah.
But, nonetheless, it's the biggest secret everybody knows that, our own government now has this kind of technology, but they don't wanna release it because a lot of it has to do with free energy, and that would collapse the energy industry around the world if we knew that we didn't need oil and gas and coal and nuclear anymore.
right.
So it runs really deep. I mean, a lot of this has consequences across the board in the life and the civilization that we know of today that would utterly change if a lot of this technology were to come out.
Yeah, absolutely. And,
Exactly.
also thinking this reminds me of Sands of Time when they were talking about this early saucer program. They were looking for people, recruiting people, engineers, scientists to build these craft. And this talks about the discussions they were having. Well, what are we going to do with these people? Because there were people within. These were actually a group outside of the Nazis. They were like a rogue faction doing all this. And they were discussing, well, they didn't want to kill these people, so they were recruiting people that would go with them wherever they were going. These people all had to agree that they were never going to see the surface world again, and that's literally in this diary. So, I mean, there was actual discussions. Maybe some people did end up getting killed, but a number of them actually went with them. So, and where they went is up for interpretation, off planet, under in the planet,
Well,
but yeah, thanks so much for joining us, Brad. This was fantastic.
Yeah.
Absolutely loved it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
oh, happy to be here, guys. Always a pleasure to speak to you two. And what I really like about both of your energy is you really are on a journey to truth. We're all trying to just figure this stuff out and put the data points together and come to a comprehensive idea of what we're dealing with here. And then this big onion called disclosure, the more layers we pull out, the deeper it goes. So it's really great the work you guys have done and bringing people together at the conferences and all your listeners here on the Journey to Truth podcast. So really
Yeah.
happy to share this information with you guys and your audience.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
And we'll
Same
just
to
let
you, by the way.
go
Oh,
ahead.
The work you've done
you.
is incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Likewise. And please let our audience know where they can find your book and all all your work and stuff. And
Oh,
about
sure, of course.
and don't you and if you have any upcoming events or anything, yeah.
I'll be in Sedona again for what is it? The Awakening.
Devar Thunderbeats conference. Yeah,
Devar
I'll
Thunder
see
Beat
you at
Cosmic
that
of
one.
August.
Cosmic Awakening conference.
Cosmic Awakening.
Yeah.
There it is.
I'll see you at
Then
that
I've
one.
got another 5D event in Vegas in September, and then driving out to South Dakota in October for Star Knowledge Conference. That should be really cool. That's more of a
Yep.
Native American one, like the one we were at in Chaco Canyon, Tyler.
Right.
So
Yeah, I'll
cool
be
there,
there.
but
I'll be at that one also. So I'll be
Awesome.
seeing you all year, it sounds like.
yeah, it's can't escape.
Right.
You can go to bradolson.com as you see my name spelled there for my conference schedule. And CCC Publishing is the book publishing website. We don't have Secrets of Antarctica on the website yet until I get physical copies, and it'll go up, and then you can get a signed copy there. But pre-order on Amazon right now, and it's going to be a great book. It's finished. The editor just got it back to me, and I'm just finishing up the images. We're going to page layout and put in an index, and it'll be done at the end of the year as
Awesome.
promised.
Awesome. It's going to be amazing.
Amazing. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Brad. It was a pleasure to have you back on, and we'll be seeing you soon. And thank you guys all for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed this and took something away from this, because even after doing research for years, Brad really pieced it all together here and painted a clear picture for people and provided some documents and maps that I had not seen yet either. Some very thorough research, and we appreciate that. So yeah, I can't wait for the full presentation once the book is out and all the you can add the rest of it. So I'm excited about that. But thank you so much, and until next time, have a great evening. We love you all. See you later. Literally the way of the heart, and that's the way of the future. So
they are the ones that guard this planet. They open portals, they close portals, and they kind of protect us as a whole.
We wake up and we're like, holy shit, I've been lied to.
And I'm going to explain how this works and why they want our souls so badly.
When I'm talking about what is possible, I mean as far as the secret space program.
It's like this is the future, and it is a part of this golden age we're moving into. There's no hiding. You can't hide this, So
your quantum body, bringing more back online, like as in reloading past lives, soul fragments coming back, dismantling implants.
It might be different star languages that might come through. And we're talking a lot about dimensional beings, and they're very highly telepathic.
It's like looking around. It doesn't see us. It can't see us. I can see it, but it can't see us. It can hear us, and it knows something's going around.
But humanity does have a bright future, and I'm going to prove it to you beyond a shadow of a doubt.
The minute I came into their energy, I was like, this isn't a real human. Their eyes were different color. And so I do believe it was a clone.
This thing is going for sometimes years at a time on these missions. Is this thing going to other planets? And I knew that they wouldn't be able to respond, but I wanted to see their reaction because that was going to tell me. And it was good because she froze up and she looked at the back of the room to her superior military guy. And then she looked back at me and she's like, we can't talk about that.
And I can hear my higher self come in, and it's definitely my higher self. Go, don't say a word, do not let them know who you are. And I began to leave my body at that point.
And it is biblical. I'm not a biblical person. I've never read the Bible. My family wasn't really religious, so it's just really interesting as I've been starting to get these updates, even through the Alliance, I'm discovering it is very much biblical.
When I got over there, a blue light come down right over me, and boom, I was on the ship. And I was looking at 6 people, 3 men, 3 women, and every one of them I looked at didn't seem very interested at all that I was there.